Welcome to the Xceptional Insights podcast. I'm Sean Wargo, and I'm joined by my colleague, Peter Hansen.
Hello.
Together, we make up the market intelligence team here at AVIXA,
where it's our job to identify trends in the economy and understand how they affect our industry, the professional audiovisual industry.
All right, today we're here to talk about the return to office, work from home situation. We've seen a lot of data and perspective out there in the media about different ideas of how this is going to play out, everything from the doomsday scenario of nobody's coming back, offices are dead, to everybody's coming back. So Peter, I'm curious from what you're seeing in the macroeconomic perspective, where are we just in past data on this trend?
Yeah, I mean, corporate office market is so important to our industry overall. You know, it's the top vertical market. So it's been a huge research focus for us, obviously, Sean, and for me in particular. And we benefit here in the United States from some really high quality data about offices, generally speaking. So it's office construction and office rent are clearly passed through in U.S. government data. And that's telling a very clear story about the overall opportunity in the office market. Office construction is the kind of thing that comes from confidence, it comes from profits, and it typically is quite sensitive to the business cycle. So you might be expecting, if we're seeing an office exodus, to see a massive drop. In the Great Recession back in 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, that saw a 50% drop from peak to trough in office construction. What we've seen in the past couple of years in the pandemic aftermath, much smaller drop and a lot of stability. And in fact, where it's stabilized, like 2022 level has been really flat so far. And it's flat at a level that is above anything we saw before 2019. So we're at a very high level of office construction. I think that's particularly remarkable because a lot of that investment is being made by companies with a lot of data. You know, they're the big, Jones Lang LaSalle type companies that are renting out massive amounts of square footage. So they have lots of data about what, how many doors are being opened, what the demand is for rented space. So that's a strong indicator that exodus kind of fear that you mentioned is not coming to fruition. Same thing in office rent. After the Great Recession, we saw years of flat office rent. After the pandemic, office rent maybe kind of flattened out for a few months, but it's been really kind of slanting upwards. It's not to say that demand for office space is just like spiking or anything like that. It's just to say that the kind of data picture that you would see if those office exodus fears were true, if people really were stopping using office space, it's not coming through in the data. Like the data reject that hypothesis. They don't say that more office use than ever. That's not clear yet. But they reject firmly the hypothesis that we're seeing an office exodus. Now, the one thing that I'm still kind of wondering about is, of course, the kind of like forward look. Okay, we've seen so far, and office construction in particular is forward looking. You don't build an office for use today. Like you build it for use in like kind of a 30-year horizon, right? So that's a bullish indicator long term. But of course, it is only data that reflects the current conditions. Sean, is there anything that you're seeing that makes you think that a change is possible? Another inflection point that might weaken the long-term prospects for the office opportunity?
Yeah, I think the question is, so the data looks great so far, leases, office construction, all that sort of stuff. I think the question out in the marketplace is whether the shoe is going to fall. So there's surveys that suggest, on the employee side, there's a good percentage of employees who are just not interested in coming back. The job market has been strong, of course, and so there's argument that employees are able to make more demands of their employers about work from home, hybrid work, remote work, all those sorts of things. So it's really more of a question of lots of data out in the market suggesting that there may be a rising trend towards this ultimate shift, that we proved out productivity over the last couple of years, that employees were able to work from home and actually get their jobs done. And so perhaps, that becomes more of a demand on them in the future. Obviously, that's a big impact to us as an industry. If offices were somehow downplayed, less important, then a big chunk of business. We know that corporate is the largest market. We know conference and collaboration, the largest solution area for Pro AV. So the question becomes, do Pro AV integrators suffer under that kind of shift as those offices become less important? However, or do they become more important? Does the opportunity bloom and grow because offices are being reconfigured to accommodate more of a hybrid workforce? So it's kind of that survey data out there across many different collection agencies trying to get a handle on this, that really has us wondering whether the data so far is review mirror, and maybe we've yet to see it. As you noted, I'd be curious, those trends didn't seem to, the data suggests that the trends would hold and that spaces are still strong. I don't know if you've seen any other data that would kind of indicate, actually on net, people are coming back, and that we're looking more at a
one
a
other
hybrid
big
mode.
piece of data that I saw in kind of the research I did earlier this year about that office space was actually there was this big project done that started launched very quickly after the start of the pandemic about working from home, and that asks kind of a representative survey of American workers about their personal kind of preferences about the amount of time they spend in person, working in person, as well as their bosses' plans. And the way that data was trending was that there was sort of a coalescing maybe of plans around about 60% of hours being in office and 40% being remote. Now that's going to vary, of course. I'm sure like certain forms of office work that just work better remotely, and then other forms of work, office work included. I mean, certain law firms are an example of a sector within office markets that are known to be more in-person centric. Finance, actually, another one that is putting pretty firm demands on their employees to be in person. So there's going to be variation, but that data suggesting kind of the long-term equilibrium settling in around 60% in, 40% out. So I think when you put together that, big, strong data sets about construction, which really is a long-term indicator. You don't make those investments if you don't have confidence about 5, 10, 15, 20, even 30 years down the road. Office rent, just confirming nothing crazy happening right now in the market. And then that survey data, it gives me a lot of confidence. And the one more piece, kind of an intuition logic point, is I just don't see when that inflection point would be. If that shoe is going to fall, what's going to cause that shoe to fall? Why hasn't that shoe fallen already? We've seen multiple. We're almost 2.5 years past the pandemic. We're over a year past widespread vaccinations. We're kind of in the new normal. Obviously things are changing, right? But I just don't see what could be another inflection point. So I think it's time for businesses to really settle into that, Pro AV facilitating the hybrid future of the office market. I think that's what the data support. And I think it's starting to come through already in a lot of our kind of IOTA and more data as well. What are you seeing in there, Sean?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. The more both IOTA and more really do point toward that hybrid model and support for this idea that offices remain strong. There's plenty of opportunity for Pro AV. I'd say our quarterly demand study, the MORE study, where we go out and survey about 2,000 end user decision makers across 9 different countries, so a very international perspective as well, is that corporate is one of the strongest areas of planned capital improvement, that then flowing into AV expenditure. And when you look at the spaces that those companies are planning to invest in, it is a lot of the group collaboration spaces, individual workspaces. So right now, it does appear, as we look forward, and those studies do capture what's coming up for the coming quarter rather than rear view. It's not what did you spend on, it's what do you plan to spend on. All of that points to corporate enterprises essentially saying, we are voting on the office. We do think that even if it's not a 5-day work week anymore in the actual office, maybe it's more like 3, as you're noting, or some other combination thereof. They are planning to invest accordingly. And so that's where our IOTA, the Industry Outlook Trends Analysis annual forecast, really picks up and says, yeah, as a long-term trend, we do see corporate and conference and collaboration solution area both being strong areas of investment. Not quite as strong as they were. Over the last 2 years, we certainly saw a surge. In fact, conference and collaboration was the one solution area during the pandemic that actually net grew. Every single other solution area, as in-person really pulled back, was actually in decline. And some of that was, of course, adaptive measures. It was kitting people to be able to work from home, but it was also getting flexible and creative about how you use space. And so that's when you talk to integrators, as they kind of translate all of this data into real opportunity for themselves and seeing seeing it unfold for them, it has been design of new space. It has been reimagination of space. It has been rekitting of conferencing and collaboration spaces in the office, and even helping to elevate, improve upon individual office experience. I think, if anything, we've raised the bar, right? We've gotten more used to kind of an online hybrid sort of engagement mode, meeting mode, and our level of expectation is higher on what we would want from our work experience and our online meeting experience. So I think all of that is translating for good opportunity for us. To put a hard number on it, corporate already the largest. And while growth percent might be less over the next 5 years for the corporate marketplace, we still see it adding $18 billion to Pro AV over the next 5 years. Put that into context, that's like 2 retail markets for Pro AV, if you just look at kind of relative sizing. So clearly we see continued investment happening here. And I would say, thus, as a marketplace, our bet right now is on hybrid. Just always good for us to be playing the economist, right, Peter, and taking possible alternative perspectives and looking at it. So not sure if there's any other closing thoughts you have or other data that you would see that kind of echoes what we're seeing.
I have 2 points where I think that Pro AV will kind of continue to profit and take advantage of the period that we're in. One is just something that heard actually at ISE, talking with someone who's working for one of the biggest like office kind of design firms in Europe. And one thing he was saying is that the way office investments are going right now is prizing greatly flexibility. I mean, they're building a conference room. They want a conference room that maybe they can shift to use for a like organizational wide, or at least like a marketing team wide, a large meeting, and then shift to, say, a market intelligence meeting. It's small, it's 5, it's intimate. It's that flexibility thing. So I think that reflects 2 things. One is you need to have some professional AV. You can't just like bang and hang and then expect to be able to get flexible use out of it. Like you need to have that well thought out, good equipment that's well installed and well supported as well. And I think it means as well is like we don't know exactly what norms are for the offices long term. I mean, that's why they're investing in flexibility now. So I think that means that like over the next 5 years, as we settle into new norms, companies are going to have to go back to their AV and IT partners and construction partners and say, hey, look, we made some investments in 2022 and they're good, but we need to make some new investments here in 2024, 2025 to settle in and really serve the needs that we've kind of settled on, that the world has settled on now that we're more years into this kind of new hybrid. The other place that, and I don't know if you've been hearing anything about this, Sean, that I think is kind of a growth area, small, but is the sort of corporate event space. When you have even the modern sort of like hybrid office, it's going to have a lot more remote workers. There's going to be, whether it's a long-term employee who has to move for a family reason, or just like a star candidate who's unwilling to relocate, but is not the kind of person that a company can afford to pass up on. Companies are going to have a lot more remote workers, and I'm thinking that means that the sort of annual corporate event, maybe quarterly gathering. Here at AVIXA, we did Top Golf last week to kind of like get everyone's face together, together face to face, and has time. And I'm wondering, like, and expecting that that's going to be kind of a growth area, like companies, kind of event style, maybe fixed space, to create those moments where people can gather. I think that's an area where AV might see some high growth. I mean, it's a small, that's a niche market. Live events and like fixed event kind of spaces is not the biggest vertical market, and this is only a small subset of that. But that's a place where I'm curious about. Any places where you think big, kind of maybe under thought about, or small place but high growth potential, Sean?
That's a good one that you raise about live events. In fact, I'm sure that would be music to our live events community's ears, given that, as we both know, they were, and as they know even better than we do, they were the hardest segment hit by the pandemic as events came to a screeching halt. And so the idea of more corporate events, more gatherings, more opportunities to kind of put together a professional event would be a great opportunity for them. And I think what that could actually even help do is aid that recovery. As we've been talking about, they're one of the highest growth percent areas for Pro AV, given the steep declines. It's not too surprising to see. But what we've been forecasting is that the full recovery for live events wasn't until 24, 25. So really long term. If we see more corporate events, that would certainly suggest more demand for that community. So I think that is a really good one. I think we already talked about kind of AV design. I would echo the notion that with such high expectation, it puts an emphasis on the skill level needed, the level of integration expertise, the level of technology expertise to really be able to meet that objective of flexible. That's even more criteria being placed on an already very complex solution for making sure that meetings, hybrid meetings, virtual meetings, and all that sort of works well. So that clearly will be interesting to see how office spaces change in the face of all this. I would say the one big shoe left to fall, and perhaps this is a topic for us for next time, is the whole question of inflation, is the threat of a recession, and whether or not that actually potentially puts a muting effect on some of this sort of stuff, and maybe even changes the dynamic of the job market itself. So something for us to talk about next time. I think we will probably wrap up for this time. Peter, any other closing thoughts before we close today?
One thing that you mentioned with that employment need, the design need that high skill, that's something that, I know we're both looking into right now, personal research focus right now, hearing a lot about hiring challenges, seeing a lot of hiring going on in the industry. So another topic that I'm sure we'll dive into in a future segment. But with that inflation uncertainty is something to monitor quite closely. It's a dynamic time, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, this has been Xceptional Insights with Sean Wargo and Peter Hansen. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll look forward to next time.